we can do is we can go to this UV mapping mode or menu over here. And under Relax UV, we're going to just hit this LCSM apply. And what that did is it just kind of flattens it out to the best of its ability. It's going to have a little bit of scrunching going on down here, and that's okay. I think what we can do is we can try to sort of move these points away from each other. And I'll show you how to do that here in a second. I want to make sure this top one is also relaxed as well. So that's sort of evening out some of these squares, especially the ones in the middle here. So the UV space is just a little bit more readable. We're not going to have as much stretching when we put a texture over this. But a few of these, I just kind of want to move these points around. So we'll go to this UV edit point mode. Just going to get the selector out because it's a lot easier to grab these guys. Again, it would be nice if there was any kind of indicator that I'm moving it, but that's coming, I've heard. This is in the next update of Cinema 4D. We will be able to see a little gizmo for our scale and rotate, transform, all that kind of stuff. All right, these are looking pretty good. Everything's kind of flattened out. Got a little bit of scrunching here, but that's okay because that part of the geometry is also very scrunched. So we don't want to try to like stretch anything that isn't supposed to be stretched. But just kind of work with some of these points here so you have a little bit more of an even look here. Just grabbing them is just impossible. Okay. So this one needs to go up a little bit more. This one can come back out. So you see, once this is already laid out, it's a lot easier to read where these little points should go. But for now, we're going to leave them over here. We're going to keep them that same size. And we're going to do a quick UV edit of this head. And for this one, we will use point selections and a seam, just so that we know where it's going to cut. But now that we have a general understanding of that, you can just grab the faces that you want and move them into the UV space that you want it. That's the one thing that really that I needed to learn in order to understand how UV edits can work in Cinema 4D. So we're just going to do a quick select of all this. We're going to do not selecting just the visible elements. And we're going to do a loop selection on that tiny little seam that we left out. We're going to do a fill selection on the rest, which is UF, and it grabbed everything. So these are the faces we're going to use, but first we've got to do a few more things. We're going to go to point mode. This is an area that I kind of want to stay where it's at. I don't want it to flatten out or do anything weird. So let's do some selections here. Let's just grab this area here. Kind of want this area to stay flat, so let's leave it like this, maybe this area too. And everything else can kind of unfold around it. So this is called a point selection. We've gone into our face selection. We got that here. That's stored. If we go to this, it's point selection, it's here. And then we've got this line selection we're going to do. Before I get too far, let me make sure we do a set selection on this head. Go up to select, do set selection. We'll call this head. So that we can add a texture just to that area if you want. So here's our points, and then we're going to do a seam selection. This is where our path selection is going to come in really handy again. So right here is where I want this to cut. We're going to hide the cut right in the back of the head. All the way down. Right down to where we end right here. So we've given our UV, we've given body paint some information here. We've told it what we want to edit, all the faces, all the UV faces that are going to be edited. We've told it some points that we want to stay where they're at, and we've told it where we want it to cut. Making sure when we do this point selection mode, we need to make sure only select visible elements is on. We're going to deselect all those. And let's just try to grab these points again. We just have these points selected now. We got a little straggler over there, but here's the points that we want So now we have 3 pieces of information we're going to use to do this unwrapping or relaxing the UV operation. We've got this one, which is the actual UVs we want to unwrap. We've got these points here, which is where we want things to sort of stay there. And then we've got this line, which is indicating where we want to make the cut, where it's going to unfold out from there. All right, so now that we have all that information, let's go back to this polygon edit mode. Let's move it over here. Oops. With the E key selected, move it over here. And let's go to our Relax UV tab here and make sure that pinpoint selection is on and cut selected edges is on. Now we can hit apply, and beautifully it did not work. So pinning border points we're going to uncheck. There we go. Now we have this beautiful unwrapped UV layout where you can actually really see where the face is. Everything else is just, these are neck points. These are the back of the head points, which are really not that important, but it is good to know that you can keep your face where it's at, and this makes it a lot easier to be painting textures, or like I said, we can add some rosy cheeks here if you wanted, but this is really good for just making a nice even UV layout. So this is relaxed already. Got a little tiny little seam at the bottom, which looks good. And so let's just bring that over here somewhere. The last things we need to do for these hands are going to be similar to what we did before, where we're going to just take a top and bottom. We're going to find a seam where the side of the arm is and the side of the hand, and that's where we're going to cut our hand when we do this operation. So same thing that we did with the shirt, but instead of doing front and back, we're going to do a top and bottom. I'm going to try it from this angle. Like I'm not going to quite get there. Okay, so I think right there is where I want the top to end. I'll just have it go to here. And I will kind of unselect some of these so that the top is actually right here. Maybe not. So I kind of want to have this thumb be as part of the top. So maybe we'll have this UV layout turn a little bit. Yeah, so that the top changes for the thumb shape here. You just sort of have to think in terms of where you want your textures to lay, and how you want this to be editable later when you are making textures. All right. Not a super huge fan of that, but I think that will work. This is a good place to have a little seam. Just got to make sure I remember that. And let's just make sure we go through each of these fingers and add the faces that need to be added to make sure we're sort of doing the top and bottom selection here. It's going to be really tricky not to select any of the wrong faces and to make sure we select all the right faces. So I'm going to make sure and get in here and get on this fingernail here. Absolutely sure here. Again, this is one of those processes that once you know what you're doing, you know, it takes some time, but it's not hard. It's actually kind of fun. You know, this is kind of relaxing for me. I'm just going through and just making sure I'm grabbing all the faces. I'm almost certain, there it is. Okay, and then we have it turning there. This is the top, but it turns here. I don't know if I like that, so I'm gonna add another few faces to this so that this part is also considered the top. Okay. Change my mind, just for consistency. Okay, yep, that'll be the bottom. All right, so I'm hoping I'm not forgetting any. If I did forget any, I'll just go back and do it again. I think I got them all. This is the hand top. Let's set a selection for it. Left hand top. And then what we can do that frontal projection once more, like this. We just get it positioned on our camera like this. And then we're going to use our BP or UV edit mode. We'll move it up here somewhere over here. And then let's do a frontal projection. There we go. It's projected now like that. And we can do a relax UV. We're not going to do pinpoint selection. We do want to keep border points pinned, and press apply, and that sort of, it didn't really work like I wanted it to. Definitely not. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to care too much that this thumb is kind of going underneath this this hand, because I just wanted it to have some kind of UV layout that we can use later. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just grab the other side. Like this. So I'm using the UV polygon mode. And that grabs all the other faces, which is kind of nice. We'll make sure we are not on the woman on that selection tag. We'll make a new selection tag, set selection. We'll call this the left hand underneath or bottom. Let's do the same thing. We just kind of line it up with our camera. And let's do a frontal projection. We can move this to where the other one was. And this is something, again, once we have all of them done, we'll just put them right back where they were, and we'll just shrink them down and make them whatever whatever size we want them to be. Let's do the other hand real quick, and then we'll just take care of the pants and the feet. All right, so now that I've done that with the other side on the hand, we've got now these 4 nicely laid out, flattened out, relaxed UVs. The hands, I'm not going to worry too much about. It does kind of fold in on itself here at the thumb, but you get the idea. What you can do if you wanted to is you could make new selections just for the thumbs and have those be their own little separate UVs. But for now, what I want to do is just make sure I'm in this UV edit mode. We'll change this to a group selection here. And then with the same tools as you would normally use inside of Cinema 4D, you can move, scale, and rotate. So if you're on E, you can move. We will scale these down, move these to the bottom corner here, just someplace. Then we're going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to grab these two, using the UV edit mode. We'll remove these, we'll scale them down. There we go. These actually, we kind of want to be pretty large, so we'll just kind of leave those big here, and then I might shrink these down a little bit more. Because whatever we tell this UV space is going to translate to how large textures will be read onto this particular element. So let's do this, make these bigger, a little smaller. And now let's grab the head, and we'll move this into a space too. There we go. So now we have laid out UVs, and I'll show you what that means for us right now. So if I make we're going to go back to normal animate mode. Actually, let's just go back to model mode, standard mode. I'm going to make a new material now. We'll just make it under color. We'll add a texture, and we'll go to where's checker? Surfaces, checkerboard. Now we can apply this to that mesh that we have that's got a nice UV now. I'm going to remove this texture tag. Actually, I want to move this down here. Okay, cool. And if we reduce all the coordinates, and kind of reduce this down, we'll just make it 10, 10, and 10. So I applied this checkerboard selection to the shirt back, but I can also apply it to the shirt front, which is here. There we go. And what we can do here is under the checkerboard, we can just increase the frequency to 100 by 100. So now you can see that we have this nicely laid out texture field that you can do a lot of cool stuff with. These arms are, they're at a diagonal, so it's up to you if you want to go into your UV edit mode and kind of straighten those out. Like if you wanted to, you could. Looks like I have just that one selected, but you can go into the UV itself, and you can grab a whole bunch of these things. And whichever direction you decide you want to rotate some of this stuff. Okay, you can see you can kind of straighten that out if you did it like this. But I'm pretty happy with even just having this nicely evened out. Nothing is stretched weird. It looking like it's kind of nice and even. There's a little bit of warping here, but not uncommon for shirts. I'm pretty happy with this layout. So yeah, we can just. I'll do the rest. I'll have this for this project file. We will have a finished UV that you can use on the pants and the feet, and I'll separate out the feet or the shoes so you can have your own texture on that as well, and that will be ready to animate at that point.